Unstable, my mother-in-law told the mediator, leaning forward in her chair like she was confiding something urgent. Frankly, I don't think she's capable of raising a child on her own. I sat across the table from her and said nothing. I just folded my hands in my lap and looked at the wall behind her head. There's a reason I've always been good at staying quiet. In my line of work, the people who talk the most are usually the ones who lose. I'm a forensic auditor. I've spent the last 9 years following money, tracing it through shell companies, falsified invoices, accounts that don't quite add up. I've helped the federal government recover over $40 million from people who thought they were too clever to get caught. I'm not loud about it. I show up, I ask questions, I look at numbers, and then I watch things unravel. My mother-in-law did not know this about me. My ex-husband Liam had never bothered to explain what I actually did for a living. To his family, I was just the woman who had married into their circle and then had the audacity to leave when things got bad. To them, I was a problem to be managed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My daughter's name is Sophie. She turned 6 in March, and in the weeks leading up to her birthday, she asked me every single morning the same question. Is Grandma coming to my party? And every morning I told her I wasn't sure, but we were going to have the best party no matter what. I'd rented out the back room at this little bakery she loved, the one with the pink awning on Elm Street, and I'd ordered a custom cake with a horse on it because that was the only thing she had talked about for 3 months. I'd invited 12 kids from her kindergarten class, her teacher, 2 of my co-workers, and yes, I had also sent invitations to Liam's parents, his sister Margot, and Margot's husband. They had RSVP'd yes. All of them. I want you to understand what that meant to Sophie. She had made a card for each of them by hand. She sat at the kitchen table with her crayons and her glitter glue. And she made individual cards, and she told me what she wanted to write inside each one, and I helped her spell the words. She put stickers on the envelopes. She asked me if we could mail them even though they lived 20 minutes away, because she thought getting mail was exciting. I mailed them. The party started at 2. By 2:30, 12 6-year-olds were running around eating cake and screaming, and it was perfect chaos. And Sophie was in the middle of it wearing a little sequined headband, and she was so happy. At 2:45, she came and found me by the gift table. "Mummy," she said, "are they here yet?" I looked at my phone. No messages. "Not yet, baby. Did something happen to them? I'm sure they're just running a little late." She nodded and went back to her friends, but she kept checking the door. I watched her do it. Every few minutes she'd glance over at the entrance to the back room. Just a quick look. Then back to her friends. They never came. No call. No text. No explanation until the following Tuesday when my mother-in-law sent me a message that said they'd had a conflict come up, that it was unavoidable, and that they'd love to take Sophie for ice cream soon to make it up to her. That was it. That was the whole message. I found out later, not from them, not from Liam, but from his cousin who'd had a little too much wine at a family dinner and mentioned it in passing, that the conflict had been Margot's husband surprising her with a long weekend in Napa Valley. They'd left Friday afternoon, private car to the airport, hotel in Sonoma, the whole thing. They had chosen a wine trip over my daughter's 6th birthday. A birthday they had RSVP'd to in writing. Sophie asked me about them a few times in the weeks after. I kept my answers simple. I said sometimes grown-ups have things come up. I said it wasn't about her. I said we'd had a wonderful party and she'd had so much fun with her friends, which was true. But I saw her face when she put the cards she'd made for them in her desk drawer. She didn't throw them away. She filed them away. There's something about that, a 6-year-old carefully filing something away instead of throwing it out, that stays with you. Meanwhile, things with Liam had been deteriorating in a different direction entirely. We'd been separated for 14 months and the divorce proceedings had turned into a slow, expensive grind. His attorney kept filing continuances, requesting more documentation, challenging the parenting schedule. I had a good lawyer and I knew we'd get there eventually, but Liam seemed committed to making the process as long and painful as possible. About 2 months after Sophie's birthday, I got a call from my mother-in-law. She'd been diagnosed with a tax issue, that was how she described it, a tax issue, and she'd gotten a letter from the IRS. She was scared. She wanted to know if I knew anyone who could help. Here's the thing, I did. I knew exactly the right people. I also knew, just from the way she described the letter, that this was probably a straightforward audit inquiry, the kind that gets resolved quickly if you have clean records and respond promptly. It was almost certainly nothing, but something made me pause. I said I'd look into it and get back to her. I asked a colleague who did tax resolution work to pull whatever public information was available on Liam's family's finances. Not illegally, just the things that are accessible if you know where to look. Property records, business filings, court judgments, the regular stuff. What my colleague found was not nothing. Liam's father, a man who had once told me at Thanksgiving that he had always handled his own affairs without any government interference, thank you very much, had been running a home renovation contracting business for 22 years, paid a lot of his workers in cash, filed some years, didn't file others, had a judgment against him from a subcontractor in 2019 that had been quietly settled, had 2 LLCs that had been dissolved without final returns. None of this was my problem, except that Liam in our divorce proceedings had claimed that he received financial support from his parents regularly, support he was counting as a reason why his own income should be viewed differently by the court. If his parents' finances were not what they appeared, that affected what he was claiming in our divorce. I didn't say anything to anyone yet, I just saved the information. Then, about 3 weeks later, Liam's attorney filed a motion claiming that I was an unfit parent. The basis was a declaration from my mother-in-law stating that she had observed concerning behavior during my time as a caregiver, that I was emotionally volatile, and that she believed Sophie would benefit from a more stable primary home, meaning Liam's household. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my office building and I read that filing on my phone. Then I put my phone in my bag. Then I sat there for a while. I thought about Sophie at the door of that bakery, checking for them. I thought about the handmade cards in her desk drawer. Then I went upstairs and called my attorney. I told her I had some financial information she might find relevant to Liam's income claims. I also told her that I wanted to respond to the unfit parent allegation aggressively and that I was prepared to document exactly what kind of support his family had actually provided for Sophie over the past 18 months, which was, to be specific, 2 birthday presents in total, one of which arrived 3 weeks late. My attorney was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, let's talk." The information I passed along went through the appropriate channels. My attorney shared the relevant portions with the court as part of our financial disclosure challenge. Some of it, separately, made its way to someone at the IRS through a referral, all entirely proper, all done through correct procedure. I have worked in compliance long enough to know exactly where the lines are. What happened next took about 4 months to fully play out. The court did not look kindly on the discrepancy between what Liam had claimed about his family's financial support and what the actual record showed. His attorney tried to walk back several of the assertions. There were 2 additional hearings. A forensic accountant, not me, an independent one, was brought in to review the financial disclosures. At the second hearing, Liam's mother appeared in person. She had clearly prepared something. She sat down and she started talking about my parenting, my temperament, my alleged instability. She was confident. She was polished. She had clearly rehearsed. The judge, a woman about 60, with reading glasses she pushed up on her nose when she was reading something carefully, let her finish. Then she looked over at Liam's attorney. "Counselor," she said, "are you aware of the financial disclosure discrepancies in this case?" Liam's attorney started to respond. The judge looked back at my mother-in-law. "And are you aware," she said in a tone that was very measured and very calm, "that your family's financial records are currently being reviewed by a third party in connection with these proceedings?" The room was quiet. "Do you understand," the judge continued, "that filing a declaration about another party's fitness as a parent, in a case where your own family's financial representations are under scrutiny, is something this court takes very seriously?" My mother-in-law's composure did something I had never seen it do. It slipped, just for a second, like a mask that moved slightly and then was put back in place. But I saw it. I didn't smile. I looked straight ahead. My attorney leaned over and wrote something on her notepad. She slid it toward me. It said, "She didn't know what she walked into." The outcome of the divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. I was granted primary physical custody of Sophie. Liam received scheduled parenting time. Child support was calculated based on a corrected financial picture, not the version he had originally presented. His attorney filed one more continuance request, which was denied. Liam called me the night after the final order. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail that started with, "I just want to talk," and I deleted it without listening to the rest. The IRS matter involving his father's business is ongoing and outside of anything I'm involved in at this point. I referred the information, I answered the questions I was asked, and then I stepped back. That's how these things work. What I do know is that the home renovation business has been quiet lately. The website is down. A few weeks after the final order came through, I took Sophie to her favorite bakery, same pink awning on Elm Street, and we sat in the window booth, and she had a hot chocolate with extra whipped cream, and I had a coffee, and she talked for 45 minutes about her kindergarten class and a girl named Penny who could do a cartwheel and a book. About horses she wanted me to get from the library. She was just a kid talking, that's all it was. And it was the best 45 minutes I'd had in years. She hasn't asked about her grandparents in a while. I think kids have a sense about these things that we underestimate. They're watching us. They're filing things away. They notice who shows up and who doesn't, and eventually they stop asking about the ones who don't. I'm not bitter. I want to be clear about that. I didn't set out to burn anyone down. I set out to protect my daughter and to tell the truth in a proceeding where lies were being told. Everything that happened after that was a natural consequence of choices other people made a long time before I ever got involved. My mother-in-law wanted the mediator to see me as unstable. What she didn't know, what none of them ever bothered to find out, was that I spend my professional life walking into rooms where people have lied about money, and I am very patient and I am very good at what I do. Some people think quiet means weak. They think calm means unaware. They think because you're not yelling, you must not know what's happening. I always know what's happening. Sophie still has those cards in her desk drawer. I haven't mentioned them. Someday she'll deal with that however she needs to deal with it, and I'll be there when she does. For now, she's got a party to plan for Penny's birthday, a library book about horse breeds, and a mother who is not going anywhere. That's enough. For right now, that is everything. I keep thinking about the moment her composure slipped. Just a flicker, less than a second, and then it was back in place. But I saw it, and I think that's the part I'll carry with me the longest. Not because I felt good about it, but because it reminded me of something I've known since I was young. The truth doesn't need to be loud to land. I didn't win because I was angry. I wasn't, really. I was tired, and I was focused, and I knew what the record showed. That's it. My whole career has been built on one simple principle, that numbers don't lie, and that patience is the only thing you need when you're working with the truth. I brought that same principle to the worst year of my life, and it held. There's a version of this story where I spent those months bitter and reactive, firing off texts, making accusations, trying to get people to see what I saw. I know women who've gone that route in divorces. I understand it. When someone files a declaration calling you an unfit mother, something primal kicks in and the instinct is to fight back immediately, loudly at every turn. But I've sat across enough tables from people who did that to know it rarely works. What works is documentation. What works is showing up prepared. What works is understanding your situation better than the other side understands theirs. That's not coldness. I want to be clear about that. Staying calm when someone attacks you isn't the same as not caring. I cared deeply about Sophie, about our future, about making sure she grew up in a stable home with a mother who wasn't consumed by someone else's chaos. Caring was exactly why I kept my head down and did the work instead of letting the anger run the show. I've thought about what I want Sophie to understand someday, when she's old enough to hear the real version of this. Not the simplified one I gave her at the time, the full one. And what I want her to take from it isn't "your mum got revenge." It's something harder to articulate, but more important. That the people who treated us as unimportant made assumptions, and assumptions have consequences. They assumed I didn't know things. They assumed quiet meant ignorant. They assumed that because I wasn't fighting loudly, I wasn't fighting at all. Every one of those assumptions cost them something. There's a kind of integrity in refusing to become the version of yourself that other people are trying to create. When someone calls you unstable in a courtroom, the easiest response is to prove them right, to get flustered, to escalate, to make it personal. Staying grounded in that moment isn't passive, it's the hardest thing in the room. It takes everything you have. And then there's Sophie herself, 6 years old, making hand-drawn cards with glitter glue, mailing them to people 20 minutes away because she thought getting mail was exciting. She didn't deserve what happened. No part of it was about her, and all of it affected her, and I couldn't fix that. What I could do was make sure that the home she came back to every day was steady. That I was steady. That no matter what was happening in a courtroom or a lawyer's office, she had a mother who showed up. That's the thing I keep coming back to. Not the judge's question, not the final order, not the quiet satisfaction of watching a carefully built lie come apart under scrutiny. It's Sophie at that pink awning bakery, talking for 45 minutes about cartwheels and horsebooks, not looking at the door anymore. She stopped looking at the door anymore. She stopped looking at the door. That's how I know we're going to be okay.